up what we
Yep.
believe all Europeans sound like. So
Yeah, I mean,
and we
I
should
think
also know before we get started here, it's like we are recording quite early for the US listener. So anyone
yes.
that makes it to the US from the US to listen today, we're extremely proud of you. And
Yeah.
we appreciate you. But or we could say it the other way, is this is a great time for our European listeners. And is it a good time for our Australian listeners? I don't think so. Australia, time is in Australia.
Oh,
It's
otherwise this is the time we would record all the time.
yeah.
I need to
Yeah,
use
so
the.
I guess Australians could be like a late night kind of thing. Like it's a 10:30. Like it's like before you go to bed, you get a little podcast live action. So
let me use the most un-Apple of all Apple products currently that I know of. I think I read that this was accidentally announced, so they had to release it. But that is the world. Can you see this? The world watch face. Now this clearly is not Apple sanctioned. It's so busy and crazy. But I can look on there and see what time is it in Sydney. Right now it's 2200 in Sydney. What? That's a fine time.
Yeah.
How come Matt Ray can't record at 10 p.m. at night?
I don't know. Not dedicated.
He tried to at one time, but he tried to, but he said he was too
fell
tired.
asleep. Well, he has KubeCon this week, so I think he may be at. I don't know what KubeCon hours are. He may be doing virtual hours or something. So
yeah. Well, you know, all you have to do
he's doing the virtual booth duty. So
yes, if recording a multi non-award winning podcast like ours is too tiring for 10:30 at night, you just have to do it for 3 years, and eventually you'll get used to it.
And then you get used to it. Now he does take in fairness to him, he does usually take the early shift, which I don't know. Maybe as we get older, the early shift doesn't seem as early anymore. We're okay with it, so maybe that's what
I'm just building a rhetorical house out of my own shit taking. So
I like it. All right. Well, speaking of which, so hey, we've got a bunch of topics in here. I put a bunch of topics in here that I think we're gonna wait for Matt. Right? Like he wanted to talk about these surveys that I didn't really read through, and of course, there's going to be trigger mesh news. So I just feel like we can either do like we did with you last week. You weren't on, and so we just made up like we knew what was going on with VMware, and we reviewed the announcements. Or good. But I think we wait. I think we wait for him on.
Well, unsurprisingly, I have not gotten around to listening to last week's episode. I think the last 3 times I have been on, I've been really a good boy and listened to it, but I've been falling back.
That's fine, Coach A. Download, like, as we tell all the listeners, just download multiple times. Listening.
That's right, on all your kids' devices. I think in many parts of my life, I'm breaking. The number one. There's the number one thing about forming a new habit is the old Gold's Gym thing. Showing up is victory.
Yeah,
and then the second one is like you can miss one day, but once you miss 2 days, you're fucked. And I think I've just been missing. I was missing 2 days too often. I got to get back on that with the habits. All right. Yeah, no, these topics are good. I did a little bit of prep time while I ate some soup.
All right. Okay. All right. So we're going to hold these other topics for Matt next week. So for everyone, sounds like for everybody, for everyone that's tuning in for the latest in trigger mesh news, come back next week. And we're going to have Matt Ray tell us all about it, which will be good. So, all right. Okay. All right. I'm ready when you are then.
Okay, let me write this person.
Oh, nice. Graham is on. Graham, I don't know where you are, but I'm glad you're here. Awesome. Maybe
I asked the person, the hard stop person, if if I can have a no show up stop, basically. So we
can do it. We can get you in under 55 minutes.
I know, but it's not fun. And and as I tell people, when the people are always so apologetic about when they have to cancel or reschedule a meeting, and my motto there is always like, hey, I love a canceled meeting. You don't need to apologize. I wish you would have canceled this meeting, even if you didn't have to.
Yeah, you need to apologize.
You should apologize for scheduling this meeting.
That's right. That's what I was going to say. Or like when you show up to the meeting, like, I got to cancel today. And people are like, really? Yeah, that's the moment you're like, no. It's like the movie projector in the elementary school room. You're like, oh, sweet. We're watching a video. How great is it?
That's right.
I love it. I still have like dreams about that. Oh my God, there's a video projector. I know that's very dating myself, but it's like, this is awesome. We're just going to chill out for an hour.
Maybe nowadays it's if you see the teacher like messing around with the HDMI connection to your giant screen, you're like, yes,
yeah. I guess
it's
maybe
another
it is.
HDMI day.
Yeah. All right.
All right, good.
All
All right.
I just got to welcome before we start, Graham. Graham's representing in Japan. Evidently, great time to watch the podcast in Japan, right? So,
are you the one, Graham, who said that you paying for a parking spot in Tokyo is more expensive than your apartment? I think I was complaining about parking.
That sounds about right. That sounds like since I've been to Tokyo all of one time, I was like, wow, this place is crowded. There's a lot of people here.
Yeah, they need to figure this shit out.
I would not. It wasn't even so much that you figured. They actually had a lot of stuff figured out. They figured out public transportation. I'm like, now I get it. Now I understand why it's so important. I was like, yeah. And Grant did. He is the one that pays more, or would have paid more for the parking spot.
That makes sense. All right.
Now we're ready. I'm ready. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I restarted with our friend Charles, our old podcast. We call it Drunker and Retired now because, I don't know what's going on with domain names and stuff. And I think it's funny because it used to be just Drunk and Retired. And I'm explaining the joke. You can figure out why it's funny for it to be called Drunker and Retired. Anyways, so I've been saving up this topic I wanted to ask him because this is kind of like the type of topics we would go over, but I don't think I'm ever going to get around to it because I've been saving it for 3 episodes. So I'm going to ask you, Brandon. How long do you wear a pair of pants before like putting it in the laundry or changing your pants?
Well, I just assuming you mean jeans because, like, let's be honest, I don't really wear many other kinds of pants these days.
Sure.
But I mean, a while. I guess let me just start off there. Like,
let's start with a wide aperture.
Yeah, let me just start out there. Like, if anyone was thinking like, twice, 2 max, it's like not even close. Like jeans, I think jeans that sort of get worn in, and they can go for at least a week or 2, right? If everything is good. Now, obviously, like there's like extenuating circumstances, like I spill stuff all over it. I think,
sure.
I go out here in Texas. I'm out riding horses, which I've actually never done, but like something like that, some activity that clearly the jeans got destroyed in, they would get the full wash.
Yeah, but for like let's call it the office workload, especially the work from home workload. I mean, it's I don't know if there is an expiration date. You have to wait for a catastrophic pants failure before really you need to change orders.
Yeah. Well, jeans especially. Obviously, I mean, like I said, I'm taking slacks and that out. Like those are usually just a once wear and maybe not dry cleaned or properly. But jeans, like I like the jeans. And I even read something. I mean, maybe this is just validating your own thoughts right here, seeking that. But I think I read something. Even people said that like expensive jeans, especially, like you shouldn't wash them as much, right? Because if I don't know what people pay on jeans, but like designer jeans, whatever. But like I thought that was like a fashion recommendation. It was like don't wash them as much. It'll, they'll ruin them over time. So not that I actually do that. That is not the reason I do it. I just do it out of laziness, and I just like when the jeans kind of get broken in and have a nice feel to it. So I hope that was the right answer. I hope you're not going to say
no.
I hope you were. If you say every day, a one wear only, I'd be like, oof. Kind of feel.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that we don't talk about enough as a society is the idea of, I mean, cleanliness is great, and I think there's a lot of reactions to sort of like needing to wash and be clean. But I think there is I think as we are facing climate change, we need to reconsider some of these notions that I think drive people to maybe launder their pants too much. Right now shirts. I think a shirt, for whatever reason, it's probably a little disgusting to get into it. I think a shirt you change more often, especially in like Texas, right? Because I think more of the dirtiness, your self-generated dirtiness occurs at the shirt layer. And so you got to do something there. But I feel like, with the pants, even on a very sweaty day, like I don't really have real sweaty days here. Back in Texas, like you're basically only talking about like self-dirtying just right below the belt level, right? Like you're not really even, it's just the waist area that we're talking about, could do with a wash, but the whole rest of the jeans I feel like are fine. Plus there's shorts, right? If it's going to be that hot.
Yeah. You just go to the shorts.
You're going to wear
absolutely.
Shorts, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I just think, now I want to add my thing is slacks, the dress pants. Now I wear dress pants extremely occasionally, infrequently.
Are you visiting mostly when you're visiting customers and prospective clients and stuff, or have you gone to like the dark jean as the?
I try
the
the dark jeans, the black jeans, and black jeans is let's put a footnote on that because I
that's a
want to
whole
come
other
back to
category
those.
of jean. Now that's gonna be a whole other subject.
Now I have moved in recent years to the the dark jeans. Now the problem there, maybe, and this is to your washing point, is they do fade a bit, and so at some point you got to call it on the dark jeans, and the dark jeans become the home jeans, right? Like you got to cycle through these things. And as many people complain about the problem, I mean, of course, all I'm talking about are Levi's, right? I mean, I wear some Scotch and soda jeans every now and then, but that's just an exotic thing, right? Like that's just like those drill bits that you're like, I don't really know what these are for. Maybe I'll use them one day, and you just keep them around. Like, you know, that one that like you do to do an inset screw, just like, oh man, that would be fun to do that, and you never use it. Anyways, I used a masonry drill bit the other day. That was fun, but. You know, the problem is that the Levi things are unreliable and there's too many of them, right? Like they need to have like 3 styles of Levi's. They need to have European fit Levi, American fit dad Levi, and then they need to have like bootcut Levi, you know, the cowboy that bellows out in the bottom, and all these other type of Levi's. I don't have fucking time for that. They need to just quit it with that bullshit, right? Like, yeah. So the issue is that, you know, the Levi's, they keep shifting on me. And I can't nail down, like I almost need like a skew of like, I need the 529 relaxed fit, tight fit boot, not cut. Like, you know what I mean? Like this color, like I wish I could just have that on like an Amazon subscribe and save 5% discount every year. They send me a pair, but
I think
it's going to be like that same one, you know?
Yeah, I think what you really want is the jeans with the long-term support. You know, like these jeans, you are guaranteed they're not going to change the fit or the style on you for 10 years, right? Because that's the normal thing. So that way
LTS jeans, that's what I need.
LTS jeans, like if I can, because I mean, who doesn't want that? Because it's like that is the worst thing. It's like, oh,
that's the dream.
They've updated the styles or the cut, and then you have to be in the place. You have to be like, no, and then because you're always like, oftentimes I'm shopping in the jeans that I have to replace, right? That's the thing. You're like, yes. I want these, and like, well, we don't make these anymore, right? They're gone. So, and then you have to go through the process of everything you just said. You have to be like, go through every one of these like new fits, and then you try to find one, and then you have to adjust, and eventually, you know, you get used to it. But yes, I think we would all. That would be great if someone was like, for 10 years. This cut of jean will not change at all, right? Yeah. And they will keep a very basic colors in stock, right? Like the dark jean, let's call it like the middle, and then you just know, boom, that can last forever. So I'm sure the fashion world would be totally onto this. You know, yes, we're not going to change for 10 years. That's the sales pitch.
Well, I mean, I read fashion things every night, little trade things, because it's kind of fun, and I don't know why else I would read it. And, you know, every now and then they worry about like fast fashion, like, you know, destroying, you know, seals and the world and stuff like that. So maybe we need to have like LTS fashion would be a good answer. And I think just one more, you know, to close out the topic, I need to follow this recommendation, but I realized late, I think the last 2 times I was in Austin, which is the only 2 times I was in Austin since I've lived here, so to speak. I've only been back twice. I think one of the times I was lucky enough that Academy was having its Levi's sale, where it's basically like $10, $20 off. And I think that's a little recommendation. You got to be on the lookout. I don't know if Academy is in every part of the States, but you be on the lookout for I know it's all about the Nordstrom sale. Every year, go to the Nordstrom sale, buy the stuff, but look out for the Academy Levi sale. Go there. And I think next time I'm around, I need to buy like 10 pants, 10 pairs of the ones that fit, and just stockpile them. And it's too bad you can't do that with software. Just stockpile EULAs so that you can just keep using them in serial. But eventually, we're going to need the LTS jeans. I think we should product manage that, Brandon.
All right, good jeans. I like it. I'm all in on this idea. That's a fantastic
and the black
idea.
jeans. I didn't want to go into that, but man, you gotta those.
Well, save it. That's a whole nother subject here. Let's see what time.
I know.
Make recording notes. Like it's funny. Last week, I was I guess it's kind of in your role, like the David Potts role. So I was like doing it. And I maxed out. Like I couldn't do two things at once. Like I couldn't. Because I went to edit it and I was like, oh, I didn't really make any. It's not like my editing process is so complicated, but it's like, oh, I didn't make any edit notes. I was like, oh, it was one step too far to like both make edit notes and talk and, just drive the conversation. So Cote, you were missed last week. I missed it.
I missed being there. I just wasn't feeling well.
That's fine. Hey man, you got it. So, hey, everyone watching this, we're going to talk about a bunch of new stuff coming out and probably you need to learn about all the new stuff. So what you should do is you should go see our sponsor at CBT Nuggets and sign up for Launch Training and tell them that your friends at Software Defined Talk sent you. They've been a great sponsor. So check them out.
I should go check out their Kubernetes courses.
I think we all do. We probably could all do it. So
YAML. I love the lady who's got the bangs, the English lady with the bangs that come down here. Man, if she did a course on YAML, I would watch the shit out of that. Just because the way she expresses herself is so like, oh, it's great.
I do think when you watch like an online training, even though it's recorded, like a really good presenter and trainer, like they become like your friend, right? Like you see them, like if you do like especially if you do like a multi-hour course, you're like, oh, that's like you feel like you know them. Like you'd be like
a podcast buddy.
Yeah, you're like, hey man, how are you? I really enjoyed. Like there was a woman I watched doing the Amazon stuff. I mean, at the end, I really felt like I knew her. I was like, gosh, she's like my good friend. So. All right, what are we talking about next? What do we?
We'll go in order. We'll do the container survey, and if we got some time, we'll go to the Google next thing.
Okay, and then we just got one more break. So wherever you feel good.
Well, I've been. I think as I've chronicled over the past 10 years, I'm always like unfollowing everyone on Twitter, and then I feel the need to creep back, more of a professional need that like, in my thought lording world, if you're not like involved in Twitter and following it, you kind of lose track of everyone. Like you don't really know what's going on. So every now and then I like pop in there, see what's happening. And I've noticed a lot of pictures of our buddies over there in LA at KubeCon. It's making me a little winsome, a little I wish I was there like in person. But I'm not. Maybe I was talking with someone and it seems like we're going to have a lot more in-person events next year early, which will be good. But that means KubeCon is going on now. I'm sure there's lots of product announcements, including from my company VMware, and there's one from Matt's that we'll wait for next week to talk about. But as always happens at a conference like this, there's been a lot of surveys that have come out, and I think it'd be fun to look through the surveys. And the first thing, so as always, Brandon, you'll have to take over and fill in all the potholes that I leave here. But like, we've got there's a survey that was it the New Stack did, and then one that Datadog did. No, Red Hat did. Red Hat posted it.
Yeah, it was in the New Stack. Yep.
In their advertorial over at the New Stack. Now, I love the New Stack, and they were acquired by someone, but they need to kind of rejigger the advertorial post to original content. They do great original content. They need to take some of that. They were acquired by someone, right? I forget who, but like,
yeah.
They need to take some of that money and roll it into let's say 70% original content, or no, let me. They need to have 20% more original content. I don't know what their mix is, but I feel like I see a lot. Like I'll be reading something and I'll scroll down and there'll be a giant headshot of someone, and the way it's rendered in Newsify where I read, like their bio is all linked, and I'm always like, oh, see you later, right? Like sometimes I read those. I mean, I recently had something last week posted in that method, so whatever. But sometimes I read them just to see what my fellow marketers, how they're talking and what they're going over. And every now and then, there's a Martin Fowler world level of marketing material that's also useful material. But yeah, anyways, 20% more. So I think to that point, Red Hat did a survey of, was it 100 or something? Like it was of how people were using Kubernetes. So we got two surveys to go over, Brandon. That was an extremely long footnote.
Yeah, so we got the Datadog came out with one on containers, and then our friends at the New Stack published from our friends at Red Hat. They came out with one. So it's interesting to look at them back to back. That's why I put them in here.
Yeah, totally. And now the Datadog one, did I miss it? You can't actually download a PDF. You can just scroll their top 10 info.
They have a very nice website that you can go through. No PDF for them.
And I was going to complain about that, but then I realized I didn't download the Red Hat PDF. So obviously, man, if you are looking for someone who is not a hypocrite about things, just
just
you're sorry.
Move along.
But so the thing I find myself most interested in most frequently is what people are running on Kubernetes, right? I mean, I guess the number one thing, and I think I highlighted this when we do a state of Kubernetes survey, and this is several months ago now, but I've the past 3 or so years I've ended up writing up the blog entry on it. And the thing I'm always interested in is percent of an organization's workloads running on Kubernetes, right? Like, and I go over this all the time, but I think, there's always someone's born every minute who hasn't seen the Flintstones or heard this very important distinction. And that is that, like, you've got penetration, right? So, and this is usually what you see in many of these surveys is percent of organizations running or using Kubernetes, right? And you got to be really careful getting excited about that, because that means at least, and maybe even at most, that there is one container running in Kubernetes in the entire organization, right? What you really want to pay attention to when it comes to usage of Kubernetes, what matters most is percentage of overall workloads that an organization is running. Now, secondarily, I would say what matters most, and most in the sense that it's very hard to figure out. We'll kind of reverse our way into it. But like, what actual types of applications, not workloads, but the applications are running on it, like bill pay, the process for like, approving a mortgage for someone, or like, I remember Kroger gave a presentation. I don't know what they ran this on Cloud Foundry way back when I was talking with them, but there's some software that like basically orders and plans for the trucks that trucks go to their warehouse to unload their stuff. As you can imagine. Yeah. But I mean, this very specific use case that you can imagine, if you bone that up, like eggs are not going to get to the grocery store.
Yes. Things are bad.
So yeah. So I'm, eventually, hopefully we'll get to the point with surveys where we get those kind of answers, like the types of applications running. But in the meantime, both of these surveys talk about workloads, the types of, let me pass it over to you, Brandon. How would you characterize what they call workloads in here? What is this that they're talking about?
Well, I think both of these things, I mean, they're both vendor surveys, and I think we like them. So it's not like there's nothing bad about it. But I think to go back to your point, right? Like, these are obviously trying to promote the idea that everyone should be using containers and all of that. So kind of stepping back from your original question is just like, okay, sure, we're about to talk all these container surveys, but like no one really is talking about what percent of this makes up all the workloads in their environment. But we know, like, we just know. I'm just going to guess, like, 90% of the workloads for most companies are not in containers.
Exactly. I'll give you the figure that I use now, and watch how I judo Gartner credibility here. And I've practiced this in my head many times. I'm flagging this thing here. There's a Gartner press release from last year that they estimated. Or no, this year, that they estimate that in 2020, 5% of enterprise workloads are running on Kubernetes, going up to 15% in 2024. And people might be like, oh, Gartner, they don't pay attention to anything interesting. They just pay attention to like big, boring mainstream companies. And it's like, exactly. That's exactly who I want telling me the percentage of enterprise workloads that are running there. So there you go. I think your estimate lines up with the best in the business.
But that's fine. But we know that. We all know that. So it's sort of just setting the table, right? But now, having said that, right, what is interesting is to be like, well, we are all talking about Kubernetes. It is being adopted, and it will grow in the enterprise. So it is. I think both these surveys are really interesting about, like, okay,
they're great.
What are people actually doing, right? And so we'll kind of give you the highlights here. So if we go to the Datadog survey, right, this aligned intuitively with what I would have guessed, right? They say that most of the things people are doing are Nginx, Redis, and Postgres, right? Those are the top 3 container images deployed, right? The first 2, absolute no-brainer to me, right? That's sort of the bread and butter of like, I don't know, CNCF, cloud native. You got to have yourself some Nginx, you got to have yourself some Redis. It is what it is. Postgres, I get why it's there, right? You need a database. It's easy to throw up in a container, but
also it works and it's free.
It works and it's free, but that's also kind of the fact that it's Postgres deployed in a container image sort of tells me that, to your thing around your earlier question, is like probably not a lot of logistic applications behind the scenes, right? These are probably fairly small, relatively self-contained
that's interesting.
applications, right? Because if it was mission critical, right, you probably, again, when I say this is a broad brush, I realize, but like you may be using some type of more reliable installation of your database, right? There's lots of different ways to do it. So there's probably a different way. I'm not saying, so before everyone comes, I'm not saying it can't be done in a high availability way.
How about this for some annoying wording, weasel wording is, you're probably using a more well-known reliable data source.
Right. I'm not saying Postgres isn't good. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying that like that's an indication, right, that the applications probably aren't the most mission critical. So makes total sense, right? I think that I 100% get. Now, in the new stack one, right? Very interesting here, right? Because they say the number one workloads that they're seeing with, I guess, 80%. And I'll actually put the new stack image as a image. So just look at your podcast player. If you're using one that shows images, you'll see it. And so they're saying the number one thing is databases or data cache, which I was really surprised. I was really because in their survey, 50%, only 56% are using some type of web server where they put e.g. Nginx. So that's fourth in their list. So it's like, that's really interesting, right? So obviously there's sample size and there's different use cases that are going on here. But the fact that databases, and then the second one is what they call data ingestion, cleansing, analytics. Like, so it's like Apache Kafka, Apache Spark, things like that. That makes sense to me too. Again, that's a very much a cloud native one. But I don't know. I didn't know what to make. It's just surprising, right? Of the Red Hat one, I was like, "Huh, that's
yeah."
Really
well, let's
like, why is that? Go ahead.
Let's look at. I mean, the demographics. Do they say? Now that I'm involved in a lot of these, man, I love the picture of Alex Handy there. Congratulations to him for being bold. He really, people should go look at his picture here. But like, the only thing that he could do better is do that whole Olin Mills thing where there's a spooky, straight-faced version of himself staring down.
And let me go back and correct one thing. I guess, to be fair, is it's like the subtle wording here is maybe what's throwing me off a little bit. It's like databases or data cache. So data cache does include Redis, right? And it does include Postgres. So I guess it does. I mean, I guess in some ways the data is matching up with the Datadog survey. It's just the fact that they put those two together. Like, I think of them as distinctly different than this. So, but maybe it's saying the same thing, right? It's like, if you're saying it's mostly Redis inside there, that would match up with Datadog. And this other stuff, these other databases would only make up probably a very small percentage of this actual, bar graph we're looking at.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. I'm getting our friend Johnny to download this report for me as we're talking. I don't want to hear it. Unsubscribe me from all marketing. Very good. Wow.
That's right.
Kudos to Red Hat that on their lead gen form, they have the option to unsubscribe me from all marketing communication right there.
All right. Well,
that's amazing.
Now that's how you build a clean opt-in list right there. That shows you got people that actually want to hear from you. That's the way to go.
Man, I'm guessing they asked Brian about that, and he told them that's what they should be doing.
That's the way it's got to go.
Give that guy a spot award.
While you're doing that, the other thing, we'll just round out the top 5 here, right? So it's databases or data cache 1, data ingestion and cleansing. So that's like your Apache Kafka we're mentioning. Then, of course, absolute software-defined talk, our number one category, logging and monitoring. Like, you just can't have enough. You can't get enough logging and monitoring. It's like it always shows up. So that's the third. Web servers like Nginx, fourth. And then fifth, right, starts to get into, AI and machine learning. So of course that can mean a lot of stuff. So, it's interesting, right? So it's interesting that really there's a lot of that. Logging and monitoring is really interesting that it's like highest. It's more than the actual applications themselves. It's like, this kind of gets into the thing that we kind of joke about a lot of times. It's like, do we even know what we're building? Does it even matter? We're just building the logging and monitoring infrastructure. It seems like everywhere you are, it's always the same.
Yeah.
So the fact that that's such a high thing, that's sort of just like a callback to like some things never change, right? Doesn't matter what kind of architecture you have, you're always doing logging and monitoring.
Yeah. No, and you always have databases in there. And I mean, that's hints. I mean, the next thing is we should go over is the attention to stateless. But okay, so here, real-time update. Johnny sent this to me. He did some analysis here. And if you go, this is very interesting. This is great. The Red Hat survey, and I kind of glossed over this in the reading. It's basically of management and above. So if you look at the demographic breakdown, the titles are C-suite, VP, director, and manager. So there's no, so one, the Datadog one is scanning actual containers, right? They didn't ask anyone these things. They scanned things. And two, the Red Hat survey respondents are not the people building the containers. They're the ones who are managers and above, right? So they're, it's always fun in a survey to ask the individual contributors versus like 4 levels up the hierarchy, like what's going on. There's consistently wickedly hilarious mismatch between perception of what's happening between the two. But so I think, and the other thing that makes the Red Hat one a good survey is, let me do the math. 32 plus 43 is 80. No, no. Actually, what I care about is 1,001. So 10,000. So 43 plus 25. Let's what is that? 32, 70. So 68% of the people who responded work at a company that has 5,000 or more employees.
Okay.
Right? Which is pretty, that's good, right? Like big, large organizations. So I don't know why the mechanics of it, like, looks like Iceland was included as well. Greenland skipped out on the survey, but that's fine. So I think that, I don't know why, but that's probably what causes the discrepancy is you have management answering questions about what they're running in Kubernetes.
Right. Maybe that answers the first question. Like if you're just looking at from a management perspective, I could see why databases and data cache, like think it's all one thing. Probably for our audience, like we would think of that as differently. We'd probably break that out more like they did in the Datadog survey.
Yeah. And so, okay. So, and also the Red Hat one is nice because it gives a little more hinting about the actual applications running there, right? Because there is actually a significant amount of everyone's favorite category, AI, ML, right? So you can see that there's a lot of data analysis being done there, which makes sense, right? Because data analysis is it's often done by what do you call them on the diffusion of innovation? The early majority, the early adopter nerd people, right? People who want to use tools and like who are interested in new stuff. It also is really good. It benefits from scaling horizontally. Did I get that right?
Sure.
Horizontal scaling. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also like a lot of the, you can do it stateless. Like you can just pass state around and do the analysis instead of having to do transactional state with the more well-known reliable data stores that are out there. But that's interesting. And then there's a little bit of it'd be fun to see more detail on the application servers and programming languages people use. There's message brokering stuff down there too. But it's almost like, so maybe we'll talk about this next week, but we did a survey on open source packaging. Like basically how companies govern open source packaging, which maybe we'll talk about next week. And with this people who did that survey did an interesting thing. They ask people what type of open source you use. And obviously 89% of people use operating systems that are open source, right? And so the survey, I think very wisely was like, so for the rest of the survey, we threw out operating systems because it's too much of an outlier. Like it's going to just fuzz up everything else. And so similarly, I think it would be interesting to like focus in a survey that was just about the developer stuff running on Kubernetes, even all the way down to, as is kind of alluded here, like, are they using Node? Like what UI framework are they using? And that would be that'd be fun stuff to do. But you can see a little bit of that here, which is good. Because then otherwise, I mean, my take on the workload stuff is like, yeah, man, people are running web applications.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the basic thing, right? It's like, yeah, it's kind of just the basic infrastructure you would expect. Web applications.
Yeah.
I do think the database stuff I'm interested in, because I do. I wonder about that a lot, especially people that are in deploying to any public cloud or really anything, is that, the advantage is to take advantage of some database as a service. Like when you're in any one of the hyperscalers, right? Like just get yourself out of the business of having to manage this database altogether, right? Because someone else has put it up. They've done all this. They've done all this work. So like that part is interesting to me. The fact that like all these databases are showing up in type of Kubernetes, where I was just like, hey, I think there's a way that, there's like an easy path out of it. Like that'd be one question I would ask everyone, is like, I'm glad you're doing this, all this Postgres stuff, but why? Like, why don't we find some other way? Why don't we just find someone else who's hosted it, figured it out for us, and we don't have to deal with it anymore, right? And do all the backups. The other thing I think in the Datadog one I wanted to hit on a little bit was just to say that the average number of pods per organization has doubled. So that's interesting, because that's kind of, I think that's a proxy code day for it is growing. Right. That's just sort of, I think just consumption. Right. I'm like, so first that was their number 3 bullet. And I was like, that's a really good data point that containerization is growing. But then in the Datadog survey, a number 5 point they said is pod auto scaling is becoming more popular. And then I was like, wait a minute. Maybe everyone just turned on auto scaling. Right. Like, it's like you got to figure out how to use how you got it all working. And then you're like, now let me set up auto scaling, which of course is just going to like spin stuff up for you when you need it, and then it will go away. And then I was like, wait a minute, maybe everyone just figured out how to use auto scaling. But it's the same people. It's like the same workloads. They're just scaling up. So I was like, maybe it's not growing.
That's where these surveys are going to get complicated in the coming years. And this problem was probably solved for when in VM surveys, or maybe not, right? But you're right. Like, there's a big difference between my logistics application requires. I'm just making stuff up here. 5 containers split across 3 pods, and then I want to run that redundant. So now I need. Math. Now I need 6 pods and 10 containers, right? Just to have like full redundancy. And then also I should probably have triple redundancy. And then I have like 15 warehouses. So here's the base minimum of containers I need to run. However, when it's like, the days before Thanksgiving, when everyone needs to go buy Libby's pumpkin pie, we should get them as a sponsor, in a can. Like, I shouldn't really count, spinning up all these container images as sort of like global container footprint, right? Like, or I can count it, but that's a whole other thing to count than like how many containers are actually being used. Now, us vendors would probably be like, no, you should only count the maximum in usage. We're going to follow the Oracle parking lot method of pricing, and that's all anyone should ever pay attention to. But I think as far as getting actual intelligence, like, survey people are going to have to start distinguishing between the baseline of containers that you need to run versus like scaling up to peak demand.
Yeah, well, I think what we really want is some type of what you really want to get to is like, hey, how many applications do you have? What are those applications? Like, what are the business value? And then underneath that, how are they deployed? And then just some sense of load, because obviously everything should have, to some degree, some auto scaling. And I don't know, like, I'm just reading the survey. It's like, I mean, I think probably both things are right here. Yes, people are using more pods because they have more applications. And yes, there are a lot more if you will, pod deployments, because auto scaling is been actively turned on for lots of them, right? And so it's like both things can be true. So it's probably just a little bit like, if we were to just track this number over time, we would say it's slightly inflated, right? We'd say some of these auto scaling thing is just the regular applications being scaled, right? There's no new workloads here. And that's what we really care about. And then, of course, your favorite, Cote, the other thing I like is number 6 was, this is the Datadog survey, organizations are deploying more stateful workloads on containers. That's real shocking,
always
right?
Good.
You're really surprised by that, right?
Yeah. Well, I remember reading this a couple days ago and thinking like, I know a clever phrase: "Stateless is useless," which is not entirely true, like all jokey phrases. But yeah, I mean, that's ultimately, and like I was saying a little earlier, I mean, I think the to do the wet finger in the wind analysis, anecdotal stuff, like it seems like that's what a lot of the chatter around Kubernetes is. There's two things people seem to talk about with Kubernetes nowadays, which is like, oh, YAML, and then like the other thing is like, oh, we got to have state, right? Like people really want state, which makes sense because like, I mean, you got to have state. That's otherwise like your stuff comes and goes, right? If you want to buy anything, you want to transact, like if you want to have an effect on the world, you probably need to have state. And now I guess you could do toggling, right? I mean, you're always pushing the state off to some other system. Like I was thinking you could kind of write a stateless application for a home automation thing, because the lamp will keep track of the state, whether it's on or off. But then you'd constantly have to be polling it so you could display if it was on or off. So like even for the simple thing of turning a switch on and off, you've got to maintain state somehow. Like somewhere state has to be maintained if you want the light switch to, like, if you want the icon in your home automation thing to indicate if it's on or off. Like you can't just be polling it all the time.
Yeah,
And
well, I
even
think
if you're
this is just a whole nother rat hole. We could go on for hours, like, because this is my, like, I think I've had this conversation much. I was like, well, what do you mean by state and what do you mean by stateless? Like, it just, like, when you get inside this, it can just, like, to your point, it could be very simple, like you said, like a lamp, or it could be like, I'm maintaining the state for like a very long, complicated business transaction, right? That is, and it's like,
yeah.
they're pretty different things, right? That's pretty different. So when we lump this together, it's like, because maybe someone would say the lamp state is, they would just, well, that's stateless, right? Because you're just sort of, that's just cached on the browser, right? Or wherever, right? And so,
Yeah.
but again, I think it's just, I think if we kind of step back from it, what matters here is like people are using it more. The fact that state applications that are stateful are being deployed more, that's just an indication that I would say maturing technology, more real world applications,
Totally.
business critical applications, it is growing, probably not as growing as much as we think because of the auto scaling, but it's generally increasing. And then, of course, we should always caveat all of this with like, this is all very exciting and very fun to read about, and we should all know about this. But at the same time, we need to remember whatever the statistic you gave earlier, over 90% of the workloads are still out there, probably in a virtual machine.
Yeah. And it's migrating those things. That's where all the excitement goes. I wonder if there's I don't think anyone who like has the time to study this kind of thing like cares about this many devilish things. Like, I think a lot of game theory came from just like guessing what Russians were going to be doing. And it was just like you just had infinite time and resources just to like watch pigeons and just come up with stuff, right? Like, but it seems like I've almost forgotten what I was going to say, Brandon. It seems like there should be like an enterprise application rule of thumb that you've got a portfolio of applications that need to be modernized. And at some point in going through, let's say those, just to, make it simple, those 100 applications, once you get to like application number 70, it's not going to be worth your time to modernize it because there's a new platform that's come along. And now you need to reevaluate that 70% that you've already modernized and see if you need to remodernize them. Right. I don't know what you call that kind of like thinking, but it's almost like you can never process 100% of those things, because as you go through it, a new, better way of doing things will happen, meaning you have to process them over again. And there must be some sort of like long-term application modernization thing that's sort of like, oh yeah, we can predict that this 15% of applications will never be modernized. and we shouldn't get hung up on the KPI that we never got around to them. I guess it's at an extremely high level, it's focusing on flow versus what's the opposite of flow?
Flooding.
Flooding. Man. Yeah. Well, so we'll have to be on the lookout for more surveys. I'm gonna have to dig more into the Red Hat one here, because this is the kind of stuff I always like looking at. There's that one has a lot of coverage of kind of like to be all that guy, like the state of Kubernetes surveys that we do. There's good questions around. What are your concerns and hopes and dreams? What do you want from Kubernetes? Which is obviously what a vendor is interested in, right? And so that will be fun to look at there. So let's see. Are there any other things to highlight there? I mean, I think surveys always delicious.
All right, good. Make a note of where we're at there. 53. I can hook you up, Coach A, with some. We've got a bunch of stuff on modernizing and heuristics and tools. So
hot surveys.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking to customers about like when it's worth it, when it's not. But I'll tell you one thing everybody needs to know: it's always worth it to go see our friends at StrongDM, because you know what, security is important. Everyone needs to protect their environment a little bit more. So go see our friends at StrongDM, sign up for the product, tell them your friend the Software Defined Talk sent you. All right, back to. I know the Red Hat one it's interesting. All of those are interesting. Like, but I do think that's the holy. I don't know. I mean, I guess between us, like we probably have, we probably can influence some of the sun. Like we do need someone to like kind of put it in perspective. I would like to see each one of these. Like the first question of both these surveys, and I guess in the case of Datadog, they could do it. Like, what are the percent? Because they're in the perfect position to do it. What are the percent of workloads monitored in a VM versus a container? Right? Like that statistic would be fantastic, because that would be looking at the absolute real data. I would be like that. I would be into that. That would be a good one. Maybe they should do that next time.
We have that in that packaging survey I was talking about. I mean, it's not universal because it's focused on that, but whatever. It's a question of like, where do you run your open source stuff? But
Datadog should be in the perfect position, right? Because you feel like that's going to be a really good sample of workloads in general, and it would probably it would probably shock us. I bet you it would be like 99% are in virtual machines. I bet you would be like, I bet we would be really off. We'd be like, oh yeah, we think it's 90%. They're like, no, it's like 99% are in VMs.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some analyst things that go over that. And then of course you'd have to do my favorite but my annoying needling move of taking all the tech companies out and then looking at the data, right? Like it's just, whenever I see tech companies in surveys, I'm like, why bother, right? Just don't survey them. That's no good.
They're not the audience we care about. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's like surveying if you did a survey about like how people do their car maintenance and repair, and it was like mechanics. Yeah, it was like 30% car designers and engineers. Just like, anyways.
Yep.
All right.
Well,
I don't know all the Google stuff, but we'll. It's
up to you. We could do. What do you want? You want to do a little Google? Then we'll do. Okay, we got 2 ads, so we're all done on the ads. So yeah, whatever you want to do next. However you want to.
What do we got here? This. Oh yeah, this does 7 minutes 40. Okay, so look at this.
We can do a little Google. We can make some Mac projections if we want, or we can. I don't know. Do whatever.
Oh, we should talk about Austin. I was thinking I need an update on what's going on there. Okay, all right. All right. Well, for whatever reason, you know how we've all, at least the hosts here, been involved in scheduling big conferences, and sometimes things happen. For some reason, Google Cloud Next is scheduled the same week as Kubernetes, as KubeCon. I don't know if that's a good idea, but here it is, and I should know what goes on in Anthos world a lot better, because I think it's like a competitor to Tanzu stuff, right? I think OpenShift, Anthos, I forget what Azure calls its thing. Azure and OpenShift are kind of, and I'm sure I'm supposed to throw like some other people in there, but those are kind of like if you want a full cloud stack for developers to run anywhere, multi-cloud. I think that's what all those things are.
Yes, you got. Let's hit on Azure Arc, right? And then
there
you
go.
And then you got AWS, EKS, and ECS Anywhere, right? Those are kind of like, of course, we've lumped a lot of stuff together. So everyone would say they're kind of slightly different, but they also do much the same thing. So
yeah. I mean, to put another plug for the Drunken Retired podcast, we spent a whole episode trying to figure out the mechanics of various types of bread and what makes bread. Here's something for the audience and you to ponder, Brandon. At what point does a piece of bread turn into pizza? Right? Because get just the pizza crust, that's bread. But you start adding stuff to it, and at some point, you don't call it bread, you call it pizza. Now, similarly, I think, what you just described to me is when I go to the wonderful bakeries in the Netherlands, all these breads are different, but they're basically all bread, right? What I'm going to do with these things is, I may be able to use them for slightly different things, but for any given type of bread, I can make 2 slices of and stick something in and make a sandwich out of it, right? So anyways, it's all bread. Maybe it's got different things. Anyhow, my whole point in that is like I don't pay as close enough attention to Anthos as I should. I remember last year I finally found like a PDF that explained it, and I read it and it made sense. But we need these analysts to come up with like, hey man, these are all just platforms. It's all just bread. I want some analysts to do that. It's all just bread, so it's easier for me to keep up with stuff.
Well, I do think kind of to your point about it's all just bread. I guess the big announcements, I guess one, I kind of every time I'm kind of like watching an industry conference, or in this case a vendor conference, I'm always like, man, the state of IT has never been more complicated. And that's not a comment on anything specific. It's just like, Google had a whole bunch of announcements on top of Microsoft's announcements on top of AWS, and VMware, and Red Hat, and everyone else. And it's like, wow, it's just, I think you could probably say this at any time in the history of technology. You're like, wow, it's never been more complicated than this. But having said that, the things that I took away from the Google Next, and there's just too many sessions, can't watch them all. But the things that I thought were really good was like, one, they spent a lot of time talking about the Google Distributed Cloud, which was basically the ability to take Anthos and then deploy Google's, as they kind of say, their software to multiple places. So they have their points of presence. So they have 140 points of presence. Very similar, it sounds like, to AWS was doing something similar. So if you needed something to run very close, but you don't want to have to manage any of it, you just would go to, like, for example, maybe they have a point of presence in Austin. Then the other one they spent a lot of time talking about that I never quite understand, but I guess I do understand it. It's like at the edge, what they really mean there, I guess it's, sorry, I should say operator, right? Which I would just call it a telco, but I guess operator is the right word. And so if you did have an application that required extremely fast latency, sounds like they're going to partner up with, telcos like AT&T and others, and they will have the ability to deploy there. I gotta be honest, like, I know it must be a huge market. Like the telco market's like its own world. I just like the people, I don't know, the enterprise customers I talk to, like, that doesn't come up. So I'm not disparaging it though. Like, it's clearly like a group of customers that need that, or just like, I don't know, I just don't work with them that much. So there's one.
That's a tasty well to jump right down right there. Cause I agree with you. Like over the years, like, so I first encountered this when I was doing the Dell Cloud strategy, right? And back in 2010, 2011, right? Like if you weren't Amazon, everyone was going through every single thing that you would do to be in cloud. And back then cloud meant public cloud. Like there was this is back in the days when you remember this word, Brandon? Bursting.
Yes.
We would do that. So anyways, and so I spent a fair amount of time like talking with and like thinking about telco stuff. And you're right. It is like, it's oddly not talked about very much. And maybe, in the realms that we're in. And I think there's, I remember Google several years ago had a similar announcement, which was basically like, we will have like regional, physically close places you can run stuff in our cloud, right? Yep. Like all the major metropolitan areas, we may have like Google zones, like, east, central, west. I don't know what zones are anymore. I'm way up here at the digital transformation level, not the Morlock level. But like, in addition to that, like I remember Google saying we're also going to have these special like city zones, like the Chicago zone. So
and that's
just
what
for
they call
latency.
Google's. That is their Google's network edge, and they have 140 locations. So
Right.
And
so it's like this. It's that thing again, which I was thinking. I was trying to and to speak about. Here's another well that branches off from this one that like is just fucking software. Like I was trying to hook up my Toyota to like the My Toyota account, and it's just a nightmare, right? Like it's and but I think that my Toyota, my car is like on its own network somewhere. You know what I mean? Like it's somehow like has its own network, which I assume I don't know if that's what 5G is or something, but like there probably are these workloads where like you don't want to be on like a normal cell phone network, or you do, and it's not the public internet, but then you want to use the whole Google Cloud infrastructure. So you have this, I don't even know the vocabulary for this. It's not an air gap thing. It's like a confusion gap thing where like you're on the Google network, but you're not on the internet, maybe kind of sort of, or
well,
something.
I think that's what they call, in this case, their name is so operator edge. So as I understand it, is that you would go to the telco and you would say, hey, I want to deploy some of my workloads, like almost like actually in, as close to the network infrastructure as possible. So that like one example they gave was like, or like at grocery stores, back to the grocery store example, Kroger, it's like, online ordering inside a grocery store. So it's like low latency is very important. Like if someone's in the grocery store scanning, wanting to do stuff, right? So you would say, I want my customers doing that. Latency is really important. So I'm going to deploy my workloads inside of the operator edge so that when it goes over the 5G, right? That's that's basically the minimum amount of latency, or the maximum latency I want is just from 5G right to your point of presence, and then I want to process the request and send it right back over your wireless network, right? I don't want it to have to travel over the length of the internet. And so like I think I understand the use case, and it seems valid. I just like, I always just contrast this with like all the customers I've talked to. I think maybe one time this has come up, but I think if I worked exclusively in telco sales or operator sales, if that was my only market I ever worked in, maybe this would come up every day, right? That's the part that I don't know.
I think maybe this is a case, at least for me, speaking for me, where like the fact that there's a whole bunch of like telco marketing buzzwords in there like makes it too confusing for me, right? Like I remember reading through this and it's all this stuff about 5G and whatever, and so I was like, oh my god, like we as an industry have almost settled on what edge means without it being some bozo term, right? Like we've almost gone over only edge scenarios, which is basically, we used to call it remote office, branch office, or warehouse for logistics, or the grocery store. It's just you want to run the stuff not in a central data center, right? And if that seems to be what edge means, and that's totally cool. Like there was a time when edge was going to be like cars and wheels on trains and like GE engines and all this stuff. And I think eventually people are like, like
well, here's what, just to clean it up a little bit. Here's how Google refers to. So operator edge, which is on their communication service providers, which I would just call them telcos, deployed this out of telco. And then the other edge they have, customer edge, which is their examples, is branch offices. Like that's what we would normally say. It's like, we need to deploy something in the branch office. And the final one that you can now deploy is the customer data centers, which is just like, that's what we call hybrid cloud or whatever, right?
Right, totally.
So those are your four options. And so you basically have three edges: the Google network edge, the 140 points of presence, you don't have to do anything; the operator edge, that's out on the telco; the customer edge, branch office. And then four, we finally returned to like our world, the world that I think you and I spend a lot of, is like, I want to run this on infrastructure in my data center. And that's the customer data center place.
Yeah. And I guess if like what I would want to be the case to simplify it is like the whole we're like a bunch of, ignorant people describing some sophisticated thing, which is just very exciting. But like, it's sort of like, Oh, so you can run part of the Google Cloud stack in a telco data center where you can also run your own software, so it's closer to each other.
Right. Yep.
Cool.
That's good. Yeah.
Like,
well, it is. I mean, I think it's one of these things.
and
Like, if you need it, if that was what you were waiting for and you need it, you're very excited. But for everyone
yeah,
else, it's like, don't. I'm going to be in a data center, or I'm just going to be on the cloud. Right? Like, I don't know. Like, for most people, latency, this kind of minimizing this kind of latency is not going to be like a top 10 problem for you. Right?
yeah,
It doesn't matter.
And maybe to your point, maybe the trade off is like, so there's another. I forget if we have this in the show notes, but there was. Yeah, because they announced this. I think Wendy's. There's a great piece on Wendy's with their CIO talking about like how they're thinking about using AI at Wendy's, and it's great because it's just. I mean, it's actually just machine learning and some advanced analytics, but it's actual like very helpful, boring stuff like telling people it's time to flip a burger, which sounds like making a tedious job, even more terrible to have like some screen telling you to flip a burger. But just things like trying to predict what order someone might want to have so that you can correct misunderstanding them over a speaker, things like that. And like, I guess there's a scenario there where you need a very small amount of latency. I mean, it's called fast food for a reason. And like, you need that small amount of latency. And so you could think like, so I'm going to build out probably vertically scaling performant data centers in each Wendy's store. Or if I can get a network connection that's reliable and fast enough, I could run those in like, the local telco data center hooked up to Google Cloud. And so like, I could see that there would be a lot of scenarios like that where you're like, I don't really want to put like a rack of servers next to the fry station in this place where the mops are going to be spilt on it. But I have to because there's no other alternative that's fast enough. But if the telcos can like hook you up with some 5G stuff, whatever the fuck that means, that like runs stuff in their operator edge, then that would be pretty straightforward and make a lot of sense.
Well, I think, there's, I think, a pretty famous, I mean, it's a Chick-fil-A case study. I can't even remember who did it, but they deployed some Kubernetes. And I think that's exactly why. It's like they needed low latency to communicate with the kitchen, I guess the kitchen appliances, right? Like, the fryers and everything.
Like literally the fryer, if I remember.
Yeah. So in that case, it was like, that made sense. And then the other one, they don't mention it as specifically on the network edge, but like high frequency trading is the other really the place that this comes up all the time, where again, like and so we would say like, well, how many people want to do it? And it's like not that many, but the people that want to do it want to pay you
a lot of money,
millions and millions of dollars. So that's why you would build out a whole business, because you're like, oh, I can just sell this to one customer and maybe they'll pay me $20 million a month because high frequency trading is throwing off hundreds of millions of dollars. So those are like, I mean, they're out there, but I don't think for the most of us it's that useful. But I do think ultimately, kind of coming up one level from where we started here, was like, hey, this is just another big push by a hyperscaler, sort of rounding out the things that other people have already introduced, but now that their push is Anthos, right? So it's all about, we joke about the manager of managers, like who wants to be on top? Well, in their vision, Anthos is the top level manager. You use Anthos to manage all of this together. It's all one nice console. You can move your workloads around. You can see it running. Of course, Tanzu's in there. That's another, Tanzu sometimes wants to be on top. And of course, Azure Arc wants to be on top, or Red Hat. So it is like, while all of these, and then of course, Google goes on to say that they're big partners with VMware. So it's always the frenemy thing going on. It's like, yeah, I can work with you, or I can also be but I really do want to be the thing that's on top. So that'll be interesting to see over time, because Google is putting a lot of effort around Anthos. Like, does Anthos become the default manager on top, or like what place does it find in the market? That'll be what I look for, like going next year at this time, how many people are doing it? All right, good. We didn't need a break, but we had one there.
Oh, you're right.
That's fine. Let me make a little note.
I was enjoying your talking.
Thing?
All right. Well then
you want to finish on the Mac stuff, or what do you want to do?
No, I wanted to ask.
Okay, no, here, just that was a natural pause. I was throwing it to you anyway, so just pick here. Let me just make a note of the time, and then you can just pick up naturally with a question.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just write this down. So 5112. Okay. question. I just pause. You just pick up the question.
So I was in reading through the stuff this week, with there's all the Google stuff and the KubeCon stuff. Like, once again, I was kind of pulling at the scab of the phrase lock-in, and I'm always like giving the chain of citations to myself, self-citating. That's always something I'm interested in figuring out, and like everyone's always mentioning lock-in, and I feel like if every single vendor is talking about how they're open and avoid lock-in, where's the one that's locking you in? and like, you were kind of reminding me with the describing, like, eventually there are, let's call it 2.5. There's 2 market leaders that sit on top of everything, right? That manage everything basically. And there's always like a third and a fourth. And like, usually people don't talk about how you're locked into those tools, right? Like, it's almost like, I don't know if this metaphor is going to work, but it's almost like what we're talking about is like, you can we'll go back to drill bits and screwdrivers. There is really no lock-in to like buying a drill, because there's a standard. You can get any drill bit. You could, like, it all fits together. I'm sure there are some drills that like you have to buy the drill bits from them, so you're locked into that platform. I guess batteries are like this with a drill. But in general, there's no lock-in with a drill when it comes to drill bits. But what there is lock-in is if you're metric or standard. Like, there's no getting out of that. Once you decide to go metric, you're fucked if you want to go to inches. Like, you're going to have to rewrite everything. We're not even talking about replatforming. You're rewriting, right? Like, you got to pull all the screws out, put the new screws in. And so, like, I feel like metaphorically, that's a lot of what systems management historically is that, like, in this weird way, like, the systems management, that layer on top, doesn't really even care about lock-in. It's just the tool set and the way of doing process that you use. And like, you have to change the way you operate totally if you swap that out, right? And I think this is why it's so hard to like get tickets out of the way IT is done, right? And like why there's such, I don't know if it's why, but it's interesting to contemplate, like, if you move from Remedy to ServiceNow, are you actually doing anything? Except, I mean, like, you're just moving data from one vendor to another. And you could argue that there was a bunch of lock-in with all your tickets and the history in one of them, but you're sort of like still locked into this way of managing things. And really, I guess this counter proves my point, is if you can migrate between those two easily, there is no lock-in. And ultimately, I think that's what people want, is they're like, I want to pay 20% less, so I'm going to move to ServiceNow. And if I can't do that and achieve, I don't even know what the metrics are, and achieve my my ROI, I've got lock-in, right?
Yeah.
Like, lock-in is there.
Maybe a better way to think about lock-in would just be quantifying switching cost, right? Because that's all that really matters. Like, to some degree, you're never locked into anything. It's just how much pain and how much money and effort are you willing to spend to switch to something, right? And
man, I feel like we had this conversation like 4 episodes ago, because I'm having strange deja vu. But
well, hopefully it's just as good now. So I think that's maybe the way to think about it, is that, hey, if you can switch relatively quickly in relative to the value that it's providing your company, it's not very much to switch, then you're good, right? You're at a good place. Now, if you're maybe the mainframe or metric, to your point before, it's like things that have almost impossible switching costs, right? Or possibly high switching costs would mean that you really are locked in, and that may put your business in a bad place.
No, I think you're right. I'm going to forget this once I say this, but like, so maybe we should have this conversation a 5th time. I'll have even stronger deja vu. But I think I'm going to start, instead of saying lock-in, I'm going to talk about switching costs. I think that, Simon Phipps used to call it, I think he had a great way of thinking about it. He put it in, Phippsian phrasing, but it was basically the freedom to leave. So you always want to throw some freedom in there if you're from that side of the open source, lake. But like, it is just the switching costs, right? And it does, like, I think that would be a discussion that I think would be interesting to have in the manager of manager layers, is to be like, never mind, like, my developers having, I think everything has basically panned out that you can minimize the here I go, the switching cost of moving from different Kubernetes distros. I don't know. I mean, that's the whole thing. But like the real lock-in, which is to say switching cost focus, is more on like, well, all these tools that I'm using to run it, what does it cost me to switch out from that? Like, and what does it cost me to switch to that? And then what would it cost if I wanted to switch away from it? Which would be, man, that would be a terrible piece of field marketing to have to put together that your salespeople would use. It's like, according to our spreadsheets, if you wanted to stop use our product, it would be the most cost effective.
Sure, but that's what customers and system integrators and others, that's what everyone's trying to do. So, I mean, kind of to your point, like, I think we could say kind of a broad statement here is that one of the key features of Kubernetes, we have collectively come to kind of push forward as a group of, everyone working in tech, is like we've tried to maintain low switching costs, right? It's that ultimately, if you're using Kubernetes and containers, right, it is generally relatively, straightforward to migrate from one to the other. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm just saying like that is kind of an overwhelming benefit of it. And that's probably, if we went back in time, that's why Docker Swarm and, DCOS and all the other ones, to some degree, like in this case, the community rejected. They're like, we don't want to have just one, and we don't want to have this lock-in. Whereas we go back to like the mainframe or Windows or wherever, right? We see much stronger lock-in to like a major vendor. But in this case, at least for the moment, right, the switching costs are pretty low to move these applications around.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so finally, Brandon, do you think we're going to go back to having an Ethernet port on Macs?
I do think I'm excited for the announcements on, I guess, what is it, next week sometime, Apple's going to bring out the new Macs. And I do think, from the enterprise software, I think of, the rumors are that the Mac Pros will add back the ports that many of us like. So an HDMI port, maybe an Ethernet port, potentially an SD card port, and then maybe MagSafe. And I was going to put this in terms of enterprise software, like in product management, there's always this quest to be like, let's solve the customer's problems. Let's make their life easier. And that often finds its way into like, we're going to create the reports that customers need, and we're going to make their life easier. We're not going to let them export the data, right? We don't want them to export data because like we want them. No. We're going to provide business value, and we're just going to show the reports that they want. And we're not going to trouble them with a JSON export or CSV or something like that. No. So this happens all the time in enterprise software. People take that away, and they're like, you see, just the reports there. And usually the customers are pissed. They're like, no, I needed it, because they have all these reasons they were doing it and then, but you're like, you don't need to do it. You don't need to do it that way. Just read the report. But then eventually, if enough time goes by, you add it back. You add back export data, and you make it better than it's ever been. You're like, yeah, I got JSON, I got CSV, I got like customizable. I can do it on a scheduled, and it's like the lesson like you learn over and over. I think in enterprise software, and I think this in Apple, the HDMI port represents that. It's like, I know you want us to use USB-C, and we'll just use DisplayPort, and we're going to use your beautiful Apple TVs. But no, like at the end of the day, like we need an HDMI port. And I would even say we need an Ethernet port, because it's just like latency. I don't know. There's nothing else I can do. Sometimes we record a podcast, I want less latency. So I'm hoping like I have been the witness to, and maybe a part of adding back export data. I hope they add back the HDMI and Ethernet port. And I'll just say for me, I'm okay with no SD card or MagSafe. It's fine. I'll live with, I'll live with the limitations of a dongle for an SD card. That's a reasonable trade-off.
That's fair.
So I hope it happens.
I have no predictions. I kind of I forgot that there's an event next week, but whatever. I have two comments there, Brandon.
Do you know why? Because your Mac, let me just say this. No, you don't. I was gonna say you have the new Mac. I was like, because your Mac has an HDMI port, but it doesn't. Go on.
Oh yeah. I've got USB-C. Boy. Wait, so let me just do a little promotion for an SD card slot. I learned this from Matt Ray. Someone kind of figured out this conceptual hack a while ago, is that if you have the right kind of insert, you can't extend the hard drive on a laptop.
Yep.
Especially and an SD card is a very good way to
secondary
give
drive.
Yourself more drive space. So it is like, it's almost like, I feel like a unspoken compromise Apple makes, that like, oh, people actually do need to have more hard drive space and they don't want to pay for it, right?
Yep.
Now, I think the way that it's conceptualized is like, oh, you want to download photos from a camera. And that said, it is really annoying. I mean, every now and then, like I found an old, let me see if I have it. I found an old Canon PowerShot at a thrift store, and I bought it just for the memories. And boy, it is a hassle to get photos off of there. I had to find like an SD card reader and like this stuff. And so it is nicer to be able to just put that card in there. But like, who really has that problem nowadays? Such a minority of person.
Listen,
like,
I'd take the SD card. I'm with you. Like, if it had it, I would be good with it.
But if you just cut things, right?
Yeah, now, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if I'm sitting with the product manager and he's like, I don't know, man. I don't know if we have enough margin in here for the SD card. And I'd be yelling at him. I'd be like, this MacBook is worth, you know what I mean? Especially now that they switched over the chips. I'm like, your margins are ridiculous. Give us the SD card. But if he's like, no, I'm only going to give you 2. I'd be like, I want it.
Now let me try for another interview to be the SVP of cables at Apple. I want to make a business strategy suggestion, and that is Apple has so much money, right? Lots of money, and I know it's all priced in, and so. But this is going to be, you know, sometimes you got to think different, even when it comes to how you're doing R&D, and I feel like I like the idea of USB-C. I want to walk back some of my EU standardizing things. I think the dithering boys have convinced me that you don't want the EU like messing around with cable standards. That's a bad idea. I mean, and indeed, my suggestion was that you do it well, which I think is an easy suggestion to make. But USB-C is cool, sort of, but they fucked that up. There's all these different types of USB-Cs. There's like, it's all a mess, right? And then also with HDMI, like, why do we have DisplayPort? Why do we have HDMI DisplayPort? Like, whatever. Like, I remember back at Dell, I heard you have DisplayPort because the licensing on it was much cheaper than HDMI. So if you wanted to have razor thin,
so I've heard
laptops, like
more margins.
Yeah, whatever. Which is probably why HDMI was on Apple, because they were like, we got margin to burn. I don't think anyone actually thinks like that, but whatever. But so Apple needs to take like, I don't know, $500 billion, like some, whatever money they're making off of Apple Arcade. That's probably at least $50 billion, right? Or something. And, and it's probably a rounding error for them. And just be like, all right, we're just going to buy all the cable people. Like whoever all these people are who are like, deciding that they don't want to all follow one standard, we own you now. And so now we're all going to follow one standard. Like, I don't know what that will mean, or like if that follows antitrust, but like, I'm sure, I shouldn't say I'm sure. Well, I am like 95% confident sure that this madness of cables we have always amounts to 2 people in one room. And one person's like, I want 5 cents. And the other person's like, I want to give you 4 cents. And then there's a third person who's like, I'll sell it to you for 4 cents, but then their cable's incompatible. And it's just like, fuck, man. Throw some pennies around, Apple, and just like solve our problems, right?
Try to get it done. I think you're right. I hope so. I hope they do it. They do, and I think we can. Because they would always say back like, "Hey, we have to make this amount of money. It's priced in." But I do think these new Macs, they have a lot of more margin to play with, right? And they can still make equally amounts, an equal, if not more, amount of money, and they could throw us a bone and make our lives just slightly easier. And I think that would be a win-win for everyone. So we'll see. Tune in next week to see what decisions.
I mean, I'm saying call me up. I got some great ideas for cable strategy, whatever at Apple. That's I'm always willing to try a new thing and see how that works out. So do we have any bureaucracy this week, Brandon?
Yeah, we have a few things here. One, several jobs posted in the jobs channel of the Slack. So Ed wants you to be a product manager at VMware, so you can work with Cote, and you need to be based in Spain. So Cote, hopefully you'll get some applicants.
Rough life being based in Spain.
Ed, we'll get some. And then Brian wants you to be a senior product manager over at Red Hat, and that's in Bangalore. And then he's got another job based in the UK. I don't know. No jobs in the US this week. I don't get it, but okay, fair enough. And then picking up on last week's discussion, we talked a little bit about how to jumpstart your car. It was an insightful discussion. Brian recommends a specific jump box. It's very similar to the one I have. So if you're looking for one, you can see the link in there. And then Chris also tells us that yes, the Tesla does a very good job of replacing the 12-volt battery. So they'll actually just send a truck out when it gets when it's about to die. So there you go. Tesla figured out batteries. No one else has. And then finally, didn't do it this week because no one emailed me. But if you want some stickers, this is what I got to do. Send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world.
That's the other job I would want to do at a company is the senior vice president of send a truck out. And the basic theory of this job is that like pretty much any problem your customers have can be taken care of if you just send a truck out. So let's build up that competency. Just send a truck out. Whatever it is, they'll fix it. And so there's several conferences now. Obviously, KubeCon is going on. It's also virtual. There's also GitOps Days coming up October 20th. There's a Trigger Mesh open source software webinar. I think software's a little redundant in there, but that's fine. That's on October 28th. I should check that out, but I probably won't. There's also MongoDB up in London on November 9th. And then finally, coming up January 17th to 20th is that conference up there in Round Rock, or Austin if you prefer. Now, I was fixing to apply to be a counselor. It took me a long time to figure out that cutesy phrasing. They just mean apply to speak. And for us to do a live recording, but I also got to get in an actual tangentially work-related thing. So I can.
We can do it. Brett's on. He'll hook you up. So if anyone wants to speak there, we
so
can
do it. I'm going to put in that we have a live recording. Maybe we'll interview some people there. I don't know, whatever. But you should go check that out. It looks like it'll be a good conference. So with that, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this week?
My recommendation this week is I've finally gotten around to finally getting 2 good monitors, and then I got a dual monitor mount, and I actually got it off Facebook Market. We've got a really good deal, so I'm going to recommend this universal dual monitor arm mount, and it has pistons on it, so you can kind of like move them independently and things like this. And I have to say, really, nothing has been better for my posture and my overall just stretching ability than having monitors that can easily move to the heights that I naturally look at. So I think I'm probably 35 years late to finally getting around to do this, but it's great. Just stating the obvious. It's like, yeah, if you can mount your monitors correctly and spend a little extra money and get yourself a nice mount, you can move them up and down, or stack some books. Don't be like me where you just kind of look down at the laptop or this monitor sitting on your desk for years, and it just gives you that permanent crink in your back. So I really like this monitor arm, but I really would recommend any monitor arm, and it's worth spending some time to do a little home setup, which I probably should have done maybe 2 years ago. So don't be like me. Do it sooner rather than later.
Oh man, I endorse that. I have those too. And the other thing that's good is I'm sure you got the type that you can spin, but you can also spin your monitor around so you can get that Al Gore setup where you have things in portrait mode. That's what I switched back to that on one monitor. I don't know if I'm going to keep that, but yeah, you got to get the monitor stands. You don't have to be like a flash trader to need monitor stands. With the pistons is exactly right, because you got to be able to move it around. Well, I have 2 recommendations. One is the most recent, and I guess last until more years pass. David Sedaris' Diaries came out, a carnival of snackery. I forget what the previous one is called, but it's as I said, diaries, not exactly his polished stories. And he reads them. He also has, for some reason, Tracy Ullman reading the parts that happen in England. I don't really know why, although it's very confusing, but she reads some of them, which is great. And of course, you want to get the audio version to hear him going over them. And yeah, they're fun. I like listening to diaries. That might be my favorite genre at the moment. And then also, I want to recommend, there have been some pictures of our friend Tasty Meets Paul at KubeCon. And I haven't watched him live streaming with JJ recently, but like Paul has really, I think he's figured out the perfect hairstyle for him. Like hair and beard, like I just like the whole thing going on there. It's almost like Australian Jesus, and I mean that in a good way. But it's just like all the pictures of Jesus that are made should be patterned after that look now, because I think it really will set the tone of what we want from the Lord and the world needs from the Lord after that. If Paul is the stamp for it, so we'll put a link to that. I forget, was it Bridget who took the picture? Someone took a picture of him. And it's just great. He's doing a good job there, and I mean that sincerely. So with that, as always, this has been Software Defined Talk. If you want to get the show notes for this episode, including more details on all those conferences we mentioned, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/324. You can see all the archives. You can subscribe to it, leave a comment in all the places. Add it to all of your children's devices, any device that you come upon. If someone asks you to take a photo of them and hands you their phone, first add a subscription to this podcast to their phone, and then take 3 pictures and see if they like it or not. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, well done. I enjoyed your. I like the download it to every phone. Yeah, Brett's actually on here. He's so Brett said you're gonna hook us up. He said we could record. Hopefully he's still good with that. And you should give a talk too, man. Give a talk. It'd be good.
I gotta just submit to that stuff. I got vacation. Oh, we both got to go. But like I have.
All right. I'm
on vacation next week. Yeah.
All right. Hey, bye, streamers. Thanks for everyone hanging in, and everyone that got up early. Really appreciate it. Graham, really appreciate you coming in from Japan. That's fantastic to see some of our listeners. All right, we'll talk to all the streamers later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.